Uber or similar drivers of Reddit, what are your weirdest stories? I could go on for days with these, but this one takes the cake. It's not a secret, but just one of many insane experiences. So I picked up a guy in a suit at around 6 p.m. on Tuesday near Venice, California. He told me to take him downtown and per usual I asked if he had a preferred route and he said, no, whatever is quickest. We get going and the usual banter begins. So how long have you been driving for Uber? Me. 1 year or so. It's a great job. He says, oh cool, where do you stay at? I answer, in the valley and he says, oh nice. So, how long have you been driving for Uber? I paused and kind of half smiled, thinking he was effing with me. He wasn't. So I answered verbatim, 1 year or so, it's a great job. He goes, oh cool, where do you stay at? This repeated 3 more times before I finally answered it differently, saying, I just started, it's not for me. And him again replying, oh cool, where do you stay at? I answered one last time the original way, but then finally, silence. By this point I was on the 10 highway, stuck in rush hour traffic. I look in my rear view and he is rubbing his head and hair profusely, like someone going through withdrawals. He took his suit jacket off and looked severely uncomfortable. I dialed 911 on my phone in case it went down. He then out of nowhere yells in a deeper voice than earlier, and I said, sir, is everything alright? And he goes, where are we? I said, on the 10 headed downtown, is that still okay? He goes, yes. At this point, by the graces of the universe, we ended up moving pretty quickly through traffic. Then, right before we exit off the 10, 2 miles or so from his apartment, he yelled again, where are we? I said, sir, we're almost to your house, is that still okay? And he goes, yes, that's fine. Once we arrive, I pull up to drop him off and he gathers his stuff, opens the door and looks back in at me before walking away and in the most genuine, kind way, says, have a great night, watch out for crazy people. Honestly, one of the strangest, creepiest events ever. Subsequently, I bought a stun gun taser, and luckily so, as this was just the beginning of several crazy incidents. So damn glad I don't drive anymore. Edit. Wow, thanks for all the responses. I think of all the suggestions, drugs seem to be the most reasonable. Dementia is possible, but the way he was sweating and getting increasingly uncomfortable in the back seat makes me think it was something artificial kicking in. Concussion? I picked up this young, overly affectionate couple that spent the entire trip making out in my backseat and telling each other that they loved each other. Cute. So I drop off the couple and head on my way to pick up my text fare. I hear a cell phone ring in my backseat, realize it's my previous rides and pick up the phone to let them know I have it and I'll come back to drop it off. Turns out it was the guy's wife phoning to check in on him while he was on a business trip, which he was thoroughly enjoying with his mistress. Did he leave you a good rating? Yeah, 5 stars and a tip. When I was going to drop off the phone I had planned to say, in front of him and his mistress, your wife sounds like a lovely person. I approached him with the phone and he handed me a 100. I was completely caught off guard so I thanked him and left. My plan totally fizzled. Uber passenger here. Had a driver tell me he was changing his name to Nilram because it was Merlin spelled backward and he was a wizard. If you spell wizard backwards, Drazu, and then use opposite letters, you spell wizard. For example, A equals Z, B equals Y, C equals X, D equals W, etc. Drove Uber one night. It was pretty tame until I picked up 2 guys who wanted to go to a strip club 40 miles away. As they requested an Uber Select fare, I was happy to drive that far, $80 to $100. It took them 15 minutes to get ready and into the car, and they seemed cool so I wasn't worried. As soon as we got on the freeway, the guy in the passenger seat started asking about Uber driving, and things got dark. After a few minutes he started saying shit like, what would you do if someone just grabbed the steering wheel and ran the car into the median, and have you ever thought about what would happen if someone in the back seat tried to strangle you while you were driving? I got a little freaked out and tried to lighten the mood by asking what they were celebrating, etc., but the one guy just kept at it. I was happy to get to the strip club and get them the hell out of the car. Bonus was the bouncer at the club gave me $40 for dropping them off there. I never drove Uber again. That's when you gotta call their level of crazy, so to speak. What would you do if someone just grabbed the steering wheel and ran the car into the median? I don't know. What would you do if your Uber driver randomly jerked the wheel and ran the car into a wall? Have you ever thought about what would happen if someone in the back seat tried to strangle you while you were driving? Have you ever thought about what would happen if you said something like that to someone who might feel compelled to defend themselves? Ha, what makes you think I'm an Uber driver? Or what's Uber? Former Uber driver here. Picked a girl up, a sweet girl from a bar on a Wednesday night, absolutely hammered, about 10 p.m. She got into my car, apologized for being so drunk and politely asked if we could just drive around a little while with the windows down. I was prepping for a cleaning fee, trying to drive and pull a vomit bag out of the glove box, but no, she just did that airplane thing with one hand out the backseat window. She asked me if I had ever thought about dying, to which I replied, yeah, I guess so. That's when she told me that she had cancer. It was in her brain and it was too far gone to consider chemo. I remember my heart just pounding. She told me she was dying and she was going to be okay. Tonight she was celebrating with her work friends who threw her a going-away party. She told them she was taking a position abroad. I just didn't tell them that abroad was heaven. I turned off my app and cried my ass all the way home. Not my story, but I had an Uber driver tell me this one, so I hope it counts by proxy. Uber driver George is doing Uber pool one night in Austin where you pick up multiple people en route to the destination. First, girl number 1 gets in the car alone and sits in the back seat on the passenger side. Then a couple, guy and girl, comes, and there's not enough room for everyone in the back, so girl number 2 sits behind the driver and guy sits up front. The two girls in the back start chatting and seem to be getting along well. Girl number 1 asks what they're doing tonight, and girl number 2 says, "Oh, me and my boyfriend Josh are going out to celebrate. Josh works at XX and just got a promotion." At this point, George notices Josh is crouching down in his seat and looking guilty. Then, girl number 1 says, "That's funny, my boyfriend is also named Josh and works at XX. I wonder if they know each other." Then girl number 2 starts tapping her boyfriend on the shoulder and bugging him to turn around to meet girl number 1. At some point Josh can't avoid the introduction anymore and is forced to turn around. He does so with a look of utter horror on his face, as it slowly dawns on both girls that they're dating the same Josh. Anyway, both girls start screaming and kick Josh out of the Uber. Not sure what happened after that, but you can bet Josh never took Uber pool again. Drove for Lyft in Denver, Colorado between jobs this summer. My third PAX ever, and he was going to the airport. He said he was moving to Florida to get away from it all. But didn't have any luggage, not even a carry-on. I wasn't going to say anything about it, but my curiosity got the best of me. "So, where's all your luggage? Did you ship everything ahead of time?" He doesn't say anything right away, and just as I was deciding that perhaps I wasn't going to get an answer. "Nah, I just had my friend call me a Lyft and he set up my flight. I just escaped from prison, but we look so much alike, his ID will work for me to travel." I was quiet the rest of the trip. My husband had a couple that broke up in the backseat of his car while driving for Uber. The woman made fun of her boyfriend's ex and was talking about how she had bad teeth. The boyfriend said her teeth were fine and that she was being really judgy. She then asked him if he was still in love with his ex. He thought for a moment, said yes, and she started crying. There was some kind of confusion about where to get dropped off since she just wanted to go home and he wanted to go somewhere the opposite direction. Super awkward for my husband. Late to the party, but I once drove some well-dressed Russians in between bars on the west side of Chicago. I used to work for a Russian-owned cab company, and I understand a little Russian, and I heard two of them talking back and forth about something one of them was very anxious about. The phrases that jumped out at me were "this is death, this is serious, blood is on me," and "I'm not a bad man." The other guy was mainly just telling him to relax a lot and telling him, "There are no fools here," or something along those lines. Upon dropping them off, like an idiot, I temporarily blanked that I had just heard parts of a seemingly harrowing conversation, and I said, 4-1 at 9 equals G8 liters, which is pronounced Dobroy Nochi and means good night. Only one of them heard me, the older guy telling his colleague to relax, and he just stared at me. Then he came around to my window while reaching into his coat pocket, which scared me. He then pulled out a $100 and said, in English, "My friend, do we understand?" I just took it, shook my head in the affirmative, and drove off. I didn't take any rides for the rest of the night. My dad was a taxi driver for around a year. He once picked up this woman with 2 children. The woman put both kids in the car and ran back in to grab her pushchair. My dad drives off thinking that she was in the car and starts to talk to her. He then realized, oh she's not in the car. He drives back and it turns out she was on the phone to the police saying, "A man's drove off with my kids." He got back and she was fine and they laughed about it after.